All right. Well, good morning. I'm Alice Murray with In-Game Press. I'm the operations manager, and I have the honor and privilege of doing work with our book club, and I get to interview in-game authors. And today we have with us Andy Clapp. I'm honored to get to talk to Andy about his new book, which just released in August. It's called In the Eye of the Storm: Withstanding the Fury of Life's Storms. So that sounds like a very exciting title. So Andy, thanks for taking the time to talk with us.
Oh, thank you, Alice. I appreciate this.
Well, I wanted to let the readers know, and if there's anybody that's watching that hasn't seen Andy's book, not only is it well written and very helpful for the reader, but it is absolutely gorgeous visually. It's got storm pictures. I mean, it's just beautiful. So if you don't get it from the words and you're a visual person, to be able to visualize a storm, you can do it through this wonderful book. So Andy, let's get to know you just a little bit before we dive into your book. So tell me, did you always want to be a writer? When you were a kid, did you go around and tell everybody, I'm going to grow up to be a writer?
No, I was going to be an athlete, and it didn't work out. I was too short for basketball. I couldn't hit a curveball in baseball. I was too small for football, so it didn't quite work out. And I did enjoy writing. My dad is very much, he has read just thousands of books throughout his life. And so when I was probably around 8th or 9th grade, I would write little short stories, but I never thought anything would come of it. And I set that aside for the longest time. And then in 2005, I started writing magazine articles, and it's just developed from there.
Well, you're not only a writer, you wear some other hats. Can you tell the folks in our book clubs, what else do you do besides write? You've got a pretty
I am a senior
life.
pastor. Yeah, I'm a senior pastor of Mount Zion Baptist Church. We are a conference host. We just had our conference recently. So we have a writing conference every year here. I'm a literary agent. I'm a husband. I'm a father. I've got 3 little kids, and yeah, I do a little bit of everything. It's because I have ADHD. I can't focus on one thing. I got to do about 10 things.
So when you have all these other hats, does that help or does that hinder your writing?
I think it helps it. I think it helps it because, I mean, here's how. Just with this book. All right, this book started as a sermon series. Oh. I looked out one Sunday, and I'll never forget that Sunday. I looked out and I knew people were going through stuff. And I looked over here, and there were some folks who had going through some financial stuff. And I looked a little further back, and somebody had just been diagnosed with cancer. I looked to my right, and this one had just lost a parent. And I looked up, another had lost a job, and another was going through just a relationship storm at home. And I started looking, and I was like, Lord, all these people are going through stuff. Everybody's got a storm. Absolutely. But how do we get them through? Because, I mean, if you addressed every storm, it was going to take forever. That'd be 40 weeks because we did 40 devotions.
Yeah.
But what the Lord told me was, the constant in all of it is Jesus. See, storms are inevitable,
right? But
the constant is Jesus. So we can either focus on the storms and the changing nature of life, or we can focus on the unchanging nature of Christ. And that was my whole goal, was to get them back to the point that they're not focused on the storm, but they're focused on the one who's there in the storm.
Well, that brings up a question I was going to ask you, because your book title, In the Eye of the Storm, is pretty, and I can't hold the book straight, obviously. In the Eye of the Storm is pretty significant. Can you explain what the significance is, the eye of the storm? People may not understand that if they're not.
Well, when you get into the eye of a hurricane, everything's swirling around you. And the crazy thing with the eye of a hurricane is it can be completely calm for a minute, but what's coming on the back half of it is the worst of the worst. And a lot of times, we're sitting here in life, and even when you're in calm areas of your life, there's stuff swirling in this world around you. Mm-hmm. And that calmness is but a moment. So who's going to get you through when the back half of that storm comes through? And it's kind of the bullseye too, to be honest with you. Mm-hmm. For a hurricane, the eye is the bullseye.
That's right.
Whoever gets the eye of that storm gets the worst of it because they catch that back half of it.
That's right. Now I'm a Floridian, so I'm really familiar with hurricanes,
Yeah.
But
Yes.
some folks that read this may not know a lot about hurricanes. Can they still be able to understand and get
Yeah.
things from your book, even if they don't know any the details about hurricanes and how they work?
Oh, absolutely. And the cool thing is they'll learn more about them. We designed it so you can learn about these things, but also get life lessons from them. Because every storm has an aftermath and a fallout. And just like every storm in our life has an aftermath and a fallout. The storms pass in our lives, but there's still who's picking up the pieces after them. And that's how we tied it back into Christ, because if we try to do it on our own, it doesn't work. But yeah, you can understand it even if you've never been through one. You'll identify with it if you've been through them as well, because we know how they are. I mean, if you've never been through a hurricane, it can be 14 to 16 hours of pure, just raging winds, pouring rains. I mean, there's nothing like it. And there are times where you wonder if you stay through one, you're going to wonder if you're going to get through it. And that's like the storms we have in life. I mean, every one of them, we're like, am I going to get through this? Well, with Jesus, you can.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, what I thought was interesting about your book is that you labeled all the storms, which is kind of cool because they give storms names now. They
Yeah.
used to just do the, coordinates or something, but they thought people can't keep up with that. So we've been giving them people's names. So it sticks in your mind when you have a name associated with it. So I thought it was interesting that you could attach like a storm of temptation, a storm of guilt, because people can relate to that name and that name is going to stick in their minds.
Absolutely.
So now you listed 40 different storms because there's 40 devotionals in your book.
Yeah.
Have you experienced all 40 of these storms?
Not all of them, no, but I've experienced a good many of them, I'll tell you that much. And just because you're a pastor doesn't mean you don't go through them. And the thing for me is, I think with all of them, what I began to do at first in my life when I was younger, and even up until probably a few years ago, I would always stop and ask God, why do I have to go through this? Why do I have to go through this? Why do I have to go through this? And a few years ago, the Lord kind of taught me to look at it differently. And now it's, what are you teaching me through this? How am I going to emerge from this better or stronger than what I was before I went into it? And I think when we get that different vantage point, and one of the reasons I wrote this book was to prepare people before a storm would hit, because one of the keys to surviving a hurricane is that you get ready before.
That's right.
And it's the same thing in our lives. We need to be ready before a storm hits our lives, rather than waiting until it's raging on us to try to get through it.
That's right. One of the big things that I've learned after being in Florida for decades is you always have a hurricane preparation kit. You have a kit beforehand. If you wait till the day the storm's supposed to be there and you run to Walmart to get watered, there's not going to be bottled water.
Yeah, exactly.
So you got to prepare in advance. So let me ask a life question, then we'll ask a spiritual question. So if you had a hurricane kit, what would be the one thing that you would have to have in it in a real life hurricane kit? Mine would be chocolate because
Yeah,
it's scary and you
and
don't
that's
know
a
what's
good one.
happening.
That's a good one. For me, it's probably Red Bull and Twinkies. I can't lie. But yeah, that and batteries, because I cannot do without, something. I have to have some kind of noise. That's the weirdest thing on a hurricane.
Mhm.
The weirdest thing is the silence, because you don't have radio, you don't have, if you don't have batteries, it is so eerily quiet. And so yeah, I'd have to have batteries in that for sure, because I gotta have some kind of noise.
That's right. Now, for a spiritual storm kit, what do you think believers should put in a spiritual hurricane kit, so to speak?
The spiritual storm kit of our lives, it needs to start with the Bible, always with the Bible, because The psalmist said, "Thy word is a lamp unto my feet and a light unto my path." And in those storms are some of the darkest nights you'll ever go through.
Mhm.
And the light that is the word of God is what guides us through those darkened times. That would be one of the things that I would say goes into that spiritual, preparedness kit. Another thing is having the right people in your life,
Mhm.
voices of wisdom, voices of guidance, not people who tell you what you want to hear, but people who tell you what you need to hear, and they do so in a godly manner. That's the people that we need. Another thing would be, honestly, and this is more of an abstract, I guess you would say, but a heart that wants to know Christ, because those who are just using Christ to get through the storm will never experience the fullness of what God is teaching us.
Mhm.
So it's imperative that we have a heart that wants to know Him, a
Right.
heart that wants to experience the life that Jesus said was a life in abundance. Because when we have that kind of a heart, that's when we shift our mindset in the storms that we go through.
That's right.
That's when we shift our vantage point and say, okay, Lord, I'm not gonna sit here and get mad about the storm. I'm gonna seek you in the storm
That's
and
right.
beyond the storm.
Well,
That's what changes.
Jesus warned us there's going to be trouble in the world, so he's already
Oh,
warned us you need to
absolutely.
be prepared. So
Absolutely.
yes, yes. Well, is there a specific devotion in your book that you feel the most connection to? Do you have a favorite?
Yeah. Actually, there is. Storm of Doubt was actually written about a night that I decided to stay during a hurricane. Alice, I don't know if you know this, but 19-year-old boys aren't the smartest creatures.
Yeah. Mhm.
And that would have been me at that point. Hurricane Fran hit 1996, and I was in college, and I lived near the coast of North Carolina. And so a couple of my buddies thought, hey, this would be fun. Let's stay and ride this thing out. And I was like, yeah, absolutely. Let's do that. And that was the longest night of my life, because I honestly didn't think I was going to get through it. At like 4:30 that day, it was just raining a little bit. I was like, is this really all you got?
Nothing.
Is this
Yeah.
really what people are worried about? By 9:30, I realized it was a lot bigger than that. We actually, I was amazingly, and this is where the title came from. We we the eye of the storm passed over Mount Olive, North Carolina, which is where I was in college at.
Mhm.
We went outside and walked around in it. I don't suggest anybody ever
Yeah.
do that, because down power lines were everywhere. By the grace of God, we didn't get lit up. But we walked out there, and I'll never forget. We got flashlights, and the trees are gone. I mean, they're gone. There was this huge sign at the baseball field. It was shattered and gone. And I'll never forget, we were standing there, and it was four of us, and we were bigger guys. We're in college, and this gust of wind came. Now everything was peaceful as could be. You could see the stars and everything. A gust of wind came and blew all four of us forward, and we took off running to get back in to shelter. And that was when the worst of it came. And that's how the title of that book actually came, was from that night, because I couldn't show it to my friends, but I was wondering. I was like, man, I don't know if we're going to live through this. Was this decision, this decision may be the thing that ends our lives. And that was only like a Cat 2 storm. I can't imagine people who go through Cat 5s.
No.
But we learned from it. The next time a hurricane came, we took off as fast as we could out of there.
That's right.
We
Well,
weren't
next thing
nowhere
you
near
know,
that
you
place.
know.
Like, bye.
So storms, we've all heard the expression, the silver lining in the cloud. So storms are horrible, but sometimes there can be silver linings. What's a positive that can come out of a storm?
Well, for
Whether it's
one
a
thing,
light storm or a hurricane storm.
oh, absolutely. Well, especially from a life storm. From a life storm, sometimes God can work things out of your life that need to be worked out of your life. Another thing is that sometimes when everything's calm, we forget our dependency on God. But when the storm's raging, we come back to that place where we realize, God, I'm not getting through this without you. And I think those are imperatives to understand that that's a blessing that comes from it. Also, we see the faithfulness of God when he brings us through that. He develops things in us through it. There's a lot of things that come from these storms that actually are not bad. They're actually really good. And that's why when you look, the truest test of faith in scripture was people going through some kind of storm, whether it was Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego going through the fiery furnace, and they said, we don't know if we're getting through this or not, but we're not going to compromise who we are. Daniel have to go in the lion's den. The children of Israel backed up at the Red Sea. Look at Peter. He went through a storm after he denied Jesus and wasn't sure, how would Jesus respond when Jesus was resurrected. Peter went through the storm of being in prison. I mean, all of them go through something, but it's how they come through it that, and God's faithfulness in it, that is so amazing.
That's right. That's right. Now, devotions, at least when I think of them, I think of it as something personal. I sit down and have my quiet time with God. I read my Bible. I read a devotion and pray. We're talking about a book club and offering people materials. How do you think people can benefit when you're talking about it in a group as opposed to a personal reading?
Here will be the key to that. A lot of times when we go through a storm, we think we're the only one going through it. And in a setting like a book club, it's a reminder to us that we're not the only ones that's gone through that storm or going through that storm. And we can help one another in that. The Bible says, rejoice with those who rejoice, weep with those who weep. And it connects us to this together in this thing we call life, because life's going to happen. And it may be that you're not going through the same storm right now that somebody else is, but you've been through it. And man, they can learn from you. They can hear how you got through it, how God got you through it. And what greater power is that than to see that somebody has gotten through this?
Sure. If a reader of your book could take one thing away from it, what would that one thing be that you would want them to take away?
The storms are inevitable. And Jesus said that at the end of the Sermon on the Mount. He said that there was a wise builder and a foolish builder. Both of them had storms. And I didn't notice this until I was writing this devotional. The way that Jesus described the storm that hit the wise builder and the foolish builder, exact same storm, but a different outcome. One was a wise builder built on the rock, heard the word of Jesus and acted on it. And he stood, the house stood, the other one collapsed. There is hope no matter what storm you're in, but you've got to be anchored in that hope that is Jesus, because we're like ships out on the sea, and these things will rock us from side to side and get us off course. But there is a way to anchor yourself in Christ, and when we're anchored in the hope of Jesus, then we're where we need to be.
That's right. Well, I want to share a tidbit with our Readers Club, because you and I know this, but the whole world doesn't know this. You kind of had a storm getting this book published. You had a storm of delay.
Yes.
You're supposed to release your book back in May, and your books were stuck out in the sea trying to get shipped from overseas in Asia here so we could release them. So you experienced a storm of delay. So
and in all of that, what I had to say was, God is sure timing.
That's right.
And that's the thing, is that when we can really let God be in control, when we say, okay, Lord, your will, your way, your time, then when these kind of storms hit us, we're not so shaken by them and rocked by them, because we know ultimately God's will be done.
Right. Last question, because we're running out of time. Unfortunately, I wish I could talk to you longer, but storms pass, they end, but then there's an aftermath, and I've lived through that too. Okay, the storm's over, but now we don't have power, we don't have water, the stores are closed. Your storm of furious writing and going through the delay to get your book out is over. But what's now? What's happening now? Where are you going forward after that activity of the storm of getting your book out and the delays? What's happening next for you on the writing horizon?
Focusing on this one right now, to be honest with you, just because I believe in the message.
Mhm.
I've got one other project with Endgame that Michelle Medlock Adams and I are doing, and I've got to finish that off this weekend to submit it. But really, my focus right now is on this book because I just believe you look at the nature of our world right now, and everybody's going through stuff.
There we go.
And I believe in this book so much that we're doing everything we can to push it and to get people aware of it because there's hope. And I think we're living in a time, Alice, where people are feeling so hopeless.
Oh, yeah.
But I know hope, and his name is Jesus. And I want them to know that hope and be able to anchor their life in that hope so that these storms don't, just tear their lives apart.
Absolutely. Well, I appreciate it. And I appreciate your giving us something to put in our life storm kit. And hopefully people will use it, not just leave it there. So I appreciate your time today, Andy. And we'll be looking forward to other devotionals that are coming out from you in the future.
Thank you, Alice.
Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.